Emma and David were ecstatic as they arrived at Blackwater Island for their honeymoon. The island was known for its untouched beaches and serene landscapes, but David's adventurous spirit was drawn to the whispers of something darker. The infamous Blackwater Caves, rumored to be haunted by a vengeful spirit. Emma was reluctant, her gut warning her against it, but David's enthusiasm was infectious. After much persuasion, she finally agreed. The couple hired a car and a driver named Martin, a rugged man who laughed off the tales of the caves but admitted his curiosity. No other driver was willing to take them, but Martin's daring nature and David's promise of a hefty tip sealed the deal. As they approached the caves, the mood shifted. The dense forest surrounding the caves seemed to breathe with an unnatural stillness, and the air felt colder despite the midday sun. Martin parked the car at the edge of the forest, and they agreed that if anyone got separated, they would return to the car and wait. The entrance to the caves was grand and beautiful, with ancient carvings etched into the rocks. As they ventured deeper, the light faded, and they switched on their torches. David led the way, followed by Emma, with Martin bringing up the rear. Suddenly, Martin shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I saw something, a shadow, tall and dark. It just crossed the path." David turned back, his torch scanning the rocky walls. "It's just your imagination, or maybe your shadow," he said, trying to sound confident, though his voice wavered slightly. But Emma felt it too, a sense of being watched, a chill that ran down her spine. "David, I don't think we should go any further," she whispered. Ignoring her, David pressed on, but the atmosphere grew heavier with each step. Strange noises echoed around them, soft whispers, faint footsteps, and the occasional chilling laugh that seemed to come from nowhere. As they ventured deeper, the cave seemed to twist and turn, as though alive. The path they had entered was no longer recognizable. "It's like a maze," Martin muttered, his bravado slipping. Suddenly, Emma screamed. She felt an icy breath on her neck, followed by a sensation of sharp nails grazing her shoulder. David spun around, but there was no one there. It's her," Martin said, his face pale. "The stories. They say a woman haunts these caves. She lures people in and they're never seen again." Emma's torch flickered and died. Panic set in as they huddled closer together. Moments later, Martin's watch stopped working, its ticking replaced by a deafening silence. Only David's torch remained functional, its beam growing weaker with every passing second. They decided to leave, but no matter which path they chose, it led them deeper into the labyrinth. The whispers grew louder, almost taunting, and occasionally a piercing scream would echo, freezing them in their tracks. David turned around to reassure Emma and Martin, but they were gone. The beam of his torch illuminated only empty darkness. His calls for them echoed unanswered. "Emma! Martin!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. A soft, melodic voice whispered in his ear, "You brought them here, and now they are mine." David spun around, his torch trembling in his hands. Standing before him was a figure cloaked in shadow, her face obscured, but her eyes glowing a menacing red. Her long, bony fingers reached out for him as the torch flickered one last time and went out. David stood frozen in the pitch-black darkness. His breath came in short gasps as the whispering voice faded into an eerie silence. He clutched his useless torch, now nothing more than dead weight in his trembling hand. "Emma! Martin!" he yelled again, his voice echoing endlessly through the labyrinth. But there was no reply. He decided to follow the path he thought he had come from, but the cave had seemingly shifted. The walls appeared closer, almost pulsing as though they were alive. The air felt heavier with every step he took, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed ominously in the distance. Meanwhile, Emma wasn't sure how or when she had lost sight of David and Martin. One moment, she was gripping David's arm, and the next, she was alone in a narrow corridor of the cave. She felt suffocated, the darkness pressing in on her. A faint light appeared ahead, flickering like a candle. "David? "Martin?" she called out, her voice quivering. The light didn't respond but seemed to move further away, luring her deeper into the cave. Against her better judgment, she followed it. As she reached the source, the light vanished, leaving her in total darkness. But then, a soft, melodic humming began. It sounded like a lullaby, gentle yet deeply unsettling. Emma turned around and gasped. A woman in tattered clothing stood behind her. Her face was obscured by matted hair, but her hollow eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The woman lifted her arm and pointed at Emma's shoulder. Emma felt a sharp burning sensation and screamed as though invisible claws were dragging across her skin. She bolted, running blindly through the caves, the haunting melody following her like a shadow. Martin had stayed behind, thinking the couple might have wandered off. But soon, he too found himself in a strange part of the cave. His flashlight flickered and died, leaving him in darkness. "Hello? Anyone?" he shouted, but his voice sounded small and insignificant. A gust of icy wind brushed past him and he spun around, but there was nothing there. Then he heard it, footsteps, soft and deliberate, approaching him from the darkness. "Who's there?" Martin yelled, his voice shaking. The footsteps stopped, and a faint laugh echoed around him. It wasn't human. It was layered, as if several voices were laughing in unison. Martin felt something cold and wet touch his hand. He recoiled, only to realize it was his own sweat dripping down. But then he looked closer and saw his hand was smeared with something black and sticky. Blood? The laughter grew louder. Panicking, Martin stumbled backward and tripped. When he looked up, the ghostly figure of a woman loomed over him, her face pale and expressionless, her hollow eyes staring into his soul. She reached out with skeletal hands and whispered, "You wanted to know the truth. Now, you'll live it." David stumbled into a larger chamber of the cave, illuminated by an unearthly bluish glow. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, and in the center of the room stood a crude altar made of bones. On the altar was a locket, old and rusted, with a picture inside. He picked it up and saw the image of a beautiful woman with piercing eyes. Beneath it was a single word carved into the altar: Elena. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the chamber. It was Emma's voice. David dropped the locket and ran, but the walls seemed to close in around him. The whispers returned, louder this time, almost mocking him. "You shouldn't have come here," the voices chanted. David stumbled into a narrow corridor, and there she was, the same woman Martin and Emma had seen. Her face was clearer now, her beauty twisted with rage. "Who are you?" David demanded, his voice breaking. The woman's hollow voice echoed, "I was betrayed, abandoned, murdered, and now you will join them." Before David could react, the ground beneath him gave way, and he plunged into darkness. The next morning, the car was discovered where Martin had parked it, but there was no sign of the trio. Local authorities organized a search party, but the caves were a maze, and no one dared go too deep. Inside the cave's entrance, they found 3 items: Emma's scarf, Martin's driver's cap, and David's torch. Beside them were fresh scratch marks on the walls, as though someone had clawed at the stone in desperation. The locals whispered about Elena, a woman who had been betrayed by her lover and left to die in the caves centuries ago. Her spirit, they said, claimed anyone foolish enough to disturb her resting place. Tourists visiting Blackwater Island reported strange sightings near the cave. Some claimed to hear faint whispers or see flickering lights. Others swore they saw 3 figures, a man, a woman, and another man, wandering the entrance as if trying to escape. And at night, when the wind was just right, the haunting lullaby of a vengeful spirit could be heard echoing across the island, a warning to those who dared enter the cursed Blackwater caves.